The end of the Tournament of Power is upon us as Goku collides with Jiren in their final fight to determine which universe is going to be the sole survivor in winning the Tournament of Power, as both individuals lay everything on the line in determining which one of the two is in fact the superior warrior. And on today's video, we're going to be discussing the Dragon Ball Super episode 130 and 131 spoilers, and further discussing the outcome as to what may happen, especially now with Frieza having to make his presence known at the very end, and potentially capitalizing on an opening in defeating Jiren at the very end, in which may lead into his revival or ultimately his demise if he doesn't end up playing his cards right. So hold on to your Dragon Balls and strap on tight, because we're going to be diving into the end of Dragon Ball Super next. If you are new to this channel and enjoy what you see, then don't forget to punch that subscribe button and turn on all notifications by clicking on the bell icon to receive new and daily content on your mobile devices, desktops, and services that I provide, along with following me on these social media platforms to stay connected with me at all times. Thank you so much for your continued support. Now let's begin. The final battle between Universe 7 and Universe 11, Goku vs. Jiren, is finally upon us, as brand new spoiler information reveals the inevitable conclusion between Goku vs. Jiren in the Tournament of Power. As joining me here today to tackle the subject of Dragon Ball Super episode 130 and episode 131 is my good friend Super Saiyan Paul. Now Paul, with the recent spoiler information that we've gathered, and with all the information that we've gathered for Goku vs. Jiren in the Tournament of Power, what I wanted to ask you is, what are your thoughts on Goku having to drop from the tournament stage? A lot of people seem to be upset on the idea that Goku, at this given point with such a huge power increase, is still able to at some given point get knocked out from the tournament stage. Now we also have a brand new preview image that was leaked, which showcases both Frieza and Goku in Dragon Ball Super episode 131, assumingly working together for that one moment until Goku falls from the tournament stage. Now if we look at that image very closely, the first thing we notice is Goku is no longer in his Ultra Instinct form. That doesn't imply that Jiren is the one that beats Goku out of that power, but it implies that Goku perhaps maybe burns right through his stamina, burns right through his power source, and having to survive the remaining seconds in that form for him to beat Jiren, but just before he does so, his power completely burns out. Now, what I wanted to ask you is, how do you personally feel about that? Do you believe that there was no point in giving Goku the form to begin with? Because if you're going to give Goku such a huge increase in power, having to basically have him be labeled as being invincible, what's the point of allowing Goku once more to gain such a remarkable power only for him to lose it in the end? So what are your overall thoughts on Jiren versus Goku? Do you believe that Jiren at this given point with such a huge increase in power is going to be relative enough to be able to survive against Master UI, or do you think that Goku's going to completely stomp Jiren out in allowing someone like Frieza at the very end to capitalize on that victory? Or do you feel differently in the fact that Jiren is not only going to be able to survive the onslaught against Goku and Frieza, but also being able to beat both of them, and thus winning the Tournament of Power at the very end?
At first, I wasn't really down with the idea of Mastered Ultra Instinct, this new hyped up form, getting defeated by Jiren and getting ringed out in the very end here, and Frieza jumping out of nowhere to probably win the match. It's not 100% confirmed, but for the most part, it's leaning towards Frieza.
Yeah, it's basically alluded to the idea.
But with those things being said, at first I absolutely hated this, because Goku having this new form, this overpowered form that's not the strongest Goku in history that shouldn't be defeated, is getting defeated within like the first episode of its full power being unleashed. So with that being said, I absolutely hated the concept of it, but after a while now, after maybe a week of thinking about it, they're basically replaying what they did with Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods, the movie. Because remember, he got Super Saiyan God, and he still pushed Beerus to a very, very huge sum of his energy, especially in the movie. They changed it when it was in the series, but he still pushed Beerus to a very, very far extent, and he still lost. So they basically replayed the beginning of the series right here at the end, which kind of makes sense when you bring it full circle, and then adding Frieza to add a twist to everything, because we do know that after everything's done and over with, because of Z, everyone's gonna survive somehow, but this changes the whole formula up, with Frieza being like the wild card and him having the chance to like redeem himself, and a whole bunch of character development on his side compared to what they did with Jiren, who's kind of a cardboard thin character in my opinion.
But it's more or less like, why even add the form then? Why give Goku the form if you're not planning on executing that form to the fullest of his ability? More or less, if you look at the form, it's structured very well. We saw how Goku was able to blitz him and repel Jiren's attacks, and in the upcoming episode, things look very intense. I mean, the overall situation between the two, it looks like it favors Goku more than Jiren, in the idea that Jiren is struggling against Goku, but Goku doesn't seem to be struggling at all. And based on the recent spoilers that we've received, you know, Goku will end up being dropped out of the tournament. Now, we don't know if that's going to be as a result of him like completely burning right through his power. We don't know if it's going to be as a result of Jiren having to inflict massive damage upon Goku, and which results in that. But let me ask you, so now that you mentioned Battle of Gods and them keeping more or less the same concept of Goku basically running out of energy, do you think that it kind of devalues Mastered UI in the tournament now? Because you're giving Goku this very, very powerful form, this very powerful, you know, technique, and the idea that Goku's not only self-aware of what he's doing, but he's also able to counter everything Jiren throws at him and more, on top of increasing his power. So with him just running out of power at the very end and potentially having to be dropped off from there, do you think that this is a detriment to Goku's development in the tournament, or do you believe that it more or less makes sense?
It doesn't necessarily make sense because of the reasons that you pointed out. For them to throw in a whole new form on top of, like, honestly, I would have been fine with Ultra Instinct Omen being mastered without the white hair transformation, but for them to throw this in the last
But essentially that's what
here,
it is. They're giving that to you in the sense of where Goku has reached the heightened, you know, portion of what Ultra Instinct is, but more or less the only downside to him having to drop out is the fact that, you know, there's potential in him having to burn right through that power. But in terms of the burning right through the power aspect, do you agree with that concept, or do you think that more or less they kind of booked themselves in the corner to where they gave Goku this incredibly powerful form, but now it's like they're more or less trying to execute the story well enough to where it more or less makes you believe that Goku's going to win, but he still ends up losing, not because he's overpowered, but the fact that his power just cannot maintain the amount of pressure that his body is going through with UI and then everything he's going through.
Which makes no sense because it's mastered Ultra Instinct. Why is he still having the same flaws as Ultra Instinct Omen? That really makes it seem like it's rushed riding yet again, and that was the constant theme throughout the entire Tournament of Power. Even to the main rival he had in here, Jiren, everyone was just rushed, and that was the flaw, and they brought it into this form. That's why I would prefer them save the white hair for later, because it has the same exact flaw as Ultra Instinct Omen if it's not being overpowered.
What about Jiren using his full power? Because, and what's really baffling to me is this whole time we were kind of, you know, being alluded to the idea that Jiren was using, you know, more or less his full power in this episode, using more or less of his full power in that episode, and it looks like, according to the spoilers, Jiren has not used his full power at all until this very point in time right now, which makes sense because his shirt's blown off, he has veins all around his head, all around his body, his aura seems to be a tad bit different, and he seems to be more or less aggressive, more aggressive than how he was in his previous fight with Goku when he fought against Ultra Instinct Omen, and even fighting characters like Hit and other people aside from that. So what are your thoughts on Jiren having to more or less use his full power now, and in your opinion, where do you think this full power to Jiren ranks in comparison to somebody like Mastered UI Goku? Does he dip below Goku? Is he more or less, you know, equal to in terms of strength, that he's able to stand up to Goku in that aspect? What are your thoughts on him having to hold back? Because it's really annoying in the idea that this whole time he's been conserving his power until this very moment in time, which to an extent it kind of makes sense because you're fighting a person that's not only able to bounce back everything you're able to throw, but also overpower you as well. So I understand that aspect, but keeping it until the very end, do you agree with that or disagree with that concept?
Well, with him keeping everything to the very end, he sparked Ultra Instinct in the first place. And where I see this form, like his 100% form, falling in place compared to Mastered Ultra Instinct is that I think it has to be marginal. I think for him to defeat Master Ultra Instinct, he's gonna have to beat him by just a thread and just have barely anything left, to the point where Frieza should be able to do some damage to him, because even though he was this powerful at the beginning of the tournament and just for plot convenience he held back until now, I still say it's been a while since he's hit this 100% form, kind of like with what Frieza did back in the day. And for that reason, that's why Goku's going to get the most out of him, as much as he possibly can, before Goku's inevitably ringed out.
So you would have to say that it more or less makes sense for him to be pushed that far, because it really is kind of baffling how this whole time all of us were fooled into thinking that he was, you know, going hard, but really he wasn't. And that's utterly terrifying, just to know that Jiren up until this very point has not been trying against anybody. Dude, that counts Vegeta, Goku, Hit, 17, everybody. Every single opposition he's faced in this tournament more or less goes back to the idea that, okay, well, you can put anybody or anything up against him. The Final Flash, the Spirit Bomb, the Ultra Instinct Omen power, and even then, he wasn't even using his full power up until this very point right now. And you just brought up something very interesting in Frieza, because you just said that perhaps maybe Frieza can execute more or less his attacks because Jiren at that point would be a little bit weakened from fighting Master GY Goku. Do you think that might end up being the case for Jiren having to be completely blown out at the very end, to where it does give Frieza the one opportunity that he has to ring him out? Or do you think more or less this is going to end in some different way? Because although the spoilers allude that Frieza is going to make an appearance out of nowhere, aiming for his revival and attacking Jiren, do you think, in your opinion, that he's going to fully execute this attack? Or do you think that he's going to attack Jiren and it isn't going to result in Jiren being wrung out, but instead it more or less keeps Jiren in the ring until they're either forced to fight or time runs out? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, from one of the spoilers before, from Herms, it said that he death beams Jiren right after.
Yeah, he death beams him, but I mean, does that really work, you know?
I think it should.
Like, Frieza, first of all, Frieza has to create enough pressure and enough force behind that blast to knock Jiren off completely. It's not impossible, because during Dragon Ball Super episode 128, we saw when Frieza came up from behind and sneak attacked Jiren and kicking him in the back of the head, and that pretty much caused Jiren to fly back onto the stage, where they had a little bit of a scuffle until, of course, Jiren had the upper hand. But more or less, Frieza did perform that sneak attack, and he executed him well enough to where he knocked him through those rocks and he brought him onto the stage. So do you think that more or less the same thing could happen, to where Frieza's death beam is enough to push him off the stage? Or do you think that perhaps maybe Frieza unleashes this attack and it more or less does nothing to affect him?
The reason why I would say it has to do something to him is because of the following. If you look at the preview for 130, it seems like Jiren's giving it everything he has. And then if you compare, Frieza still has his golden ability. Remember back when Ultra Instinct Omen first aired and how beaten up Goku was after that, and Frieza had to lend him his power?
Yeah.
I have a feeling Jiren's gonna be at that state where he's just like so weak that someone that was for like Golden Frieza's level was basically Super Saiyan Blue and a little bit higher than that because time has passed on. But Vegeta in Super Saiyan Blue was able to land hits on Jiren regardless. Now picture a weakened down Jiren versus a Golden Frieza. I think the scaling matches to where Frieza.
But Frieza's pretty weakened too, man. He got beaten down so bad. Remember, Toppo's Hakai Energy Blast, Toppo's beatdown, Jiren's punch to the back of the head, knocking him into the rocks, all that stuff, and counting 17's self-destruction explosion, to where he got enveloped in that blast, but also within that same radius, Goku, Vegeta, and Frieza were present on the rocks, to where everything went crumbling down. So taking into account that Frieza may have, sustained damage during that, during that explosion as well, that could be something as well. Because I don't see Frieza going into this fight perfectly healed. He's got to be damaged. But if Frieza does go into this fight battle damaged against a torn down, beaten down Jiren, do you still think Frieza has a chance, or is this going to end in some wacky way to where either time runs out, it's a tie? Because so many people have said it's going to end in a tie, and I really don't agree with this tournament ending in that kind of like a fashion. I definitely feel like there's going to be a winner. and that winner, to me, it might end up being Frieza because it's different. You're gonna have a villain actually be the winner of this arc, which is insane. But I think that Frieza in some way, shape, or form is going to outsmart Jiren in beating him in some way, shape, or form. Do you feel the same way, or do you feel that he's gonna try, he's gonna fail, but right before he fails, either something happens to him directly, or this whole thing just ends in a draw?
I think for them to have saved Frieza till the very end here, and remember after the Toppo fight, he had a few minutes, I think it was a minute or two off screen, and then he came back and jumped at Jiren. He was still able to go in golden after that whole beatdown against Toppo.
Yeah, but after that, it's like that was it for him. We've never seen him after, because those two haymakers he received, it put him into the dirt. He didn't get back up after that.
But after like only a couple minutes of time, I think that would still be enough compared to how Dragon Ball Super's time like lapsing has gone for him to recover enough energy to take on Jiren. But with that being said, everything's leading in terms of like Frieza winning this fight, because for Jiren to be able to defeat not only Goku but then defeat Frieza, who has this massive hype wagon, if he was able to defeat Frieza, that means he was hidden for no reason, and all of this hype around Frieza was also killed off too, which makes zero sense. And on top of that, even if it was a tie, that also doesn't give us a definitive ending to what's going to happen here, because who's going to get the wish? Who's going to get the wish? Who's going to revive everybody else? Because it doesn't necessarily make sense for it to end off in a tie. And I think it would really be unsatisfactory for the entire audience to see, okay, time's up. Winner is both universe 7 and 11. 7-11.
Well, I mean, if you go back, I think, to Mastered Ultra Instinct, I don't really see Mastered UI being showcased for the last time during this tournament. I think that at some given point we may see it come back. That all varies on the upcoming movie. That all varies on so many different aspects of like where they're going to take Dragon Ball after this. And of course we have Dragon Ball Super Episode 130 airing this week. And for those of you out there who don't know, Dragon Ball Super Episode 131, the final episode, will be airing next week. But in the end, do you think that, in your humble opinion, in your honest opinion, do you think that this is going to be the last time that we're ever going to see the execution and the utilization of Mastered Ultra Instinct, characters like Jiren, this whole thing involving, you know, the universe's strongest, aside from Universe 7, that involving Universe 11? Do you believe that this is going to be the last time that we're gonna see concepts like this, or down the line one day, do you believe that they're gonna, you know, ultimately just leave an open door for them to come back and fully explore the realms of, you know, Jiren and concepts like Mastered UI once more? Or do you think that this is going to be the last hurrah, and then after that we're going to be entering a brand new adventure? What do you think?
I think with the Dragon Ball formula in general, there's going to be another form one day, and it's going to supersede this one. And
oh god, no, dude.
I think so. And the thing about it is that Ultra Instinct, it's not limited to just Saiyans, which opens a whole new dynamic for what if other characters unlocked Ultra Instinct, even though it's just a handful of them.
It is possible. It's extremely unlikely, but it is possible. You're right.
And that opens up a new window, because they still haven't shown Goku becoming the strongest of all. Because remember, they mentioned the top 5 fighters, one of them being the Grand Priest. Goku technically still isn't up there yet. They haven't confirmed that. And I think as long as they haven't reached that yet, there's still room for growth in the show.
I definitely feel like there's so much more growth for so many different characters in the future of Dragon Ball. And as of this recording, we don't really know definitively as to when Dragon Ball is going to be coming back. Of course, the next time we'll be seeing Dragon Ball Resurge will be in December 14th for the upcoming movie. But for this, the only thing I disagree with is giving Goku such a great power only for him to lose it in the end. It brings us back to Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods. It brings us back during those times where Goku has it in the palm of his hand, but in some way, shape, or form, even with plot on his side, he still ends up losing in the end. I'm not saying that Goku should have definitively have won, even though it's different to have Frieza be the one to win the tournament. If that's going to be the case at all, I still feel like personally what they're going to do, what they might end up doing, is allowing Goku to completely weaken Jiren in order for Frieza to capitalize on that victory, and thus further setting up for the end of Dragon Ball Super in whichever direction they decide to go in. So in the end, guys, let us know your thoughts down below. What are your overall thoughts on the recent Dragon Ball Super spoilers? What are your overall thoughts on Goku having to fall from the tournament stage? Do you think it was kind of pointless in giving him Mastered UI? What are your overall overall thoughts on Frieza's execution in fighting Jiren. Thank you all so very much for watching, guys. Once again, if you guys are new to this channel, don't forget to go ahead and smash that subscribe button and turn on all notifications. That way you guys can be notified whenever a brand new video is posted onto this channel. If you guys are not following me on Twitter, be sure to follow me on Twitter to be up to date with all latest news, information, and updates. Check out Super Saiyan Paul's channel. Tune back in for more, and we'll be seeing you all down in the comment section below. Take it easy, guys. Cue my outro, bitch.